Hi, boys and girls. Miss Wardrop here with some more of Ramona and her father. We're going to continue chapter 2, Ramona and the $1 Million. I'm going to ask you a question at the end, so really be listening. One morning, smiling prettily, she thought, and swinging her lunchbox, Ramona skipped to school. Today, somebody might notice her because she was wearing her red tights. She was happy because it was a special day, the day of Ramona's parent-teacher conference. Since Mrs. Quimby was at work, Mr. Quimby was going to meet with Mrs. Quimby, her second-grade teacher. Ramona was proud to have a father who would come to school. Feeling dainty, curly-haired, and adorable, Ramona skipped into her classroom. And what did she see but Mrs. Rogers with wrinkles around her ankles? Ramona did not hesitate. She skipped right over to her teacher, and since there did not happen to be an elephant in room 2, turned the words around and said, "Mrs. Rogers, your pantyhose are wrinkled like an elephant's legs." Mrs. Rogers looked embarrassed, and the boys and girls who had already taken their seats giggled, and all the teacher said was, "Thank you, Ramona, for telling me, and remember, we do not skip inside the school building." Should she have said that about her teacher's clothes? I don't think so. Remember, she was thinking about that commercial where the little girl was at the zoo, said, "Mommy, that elephant has wrinkles just like your pantyhose." So she was trying to be like that. I don't think she should have made that choice, though, because Ramona had an uneasy feeling she had displeased her teacher. She was sure of it when Howie said, "Ramona, you sure weren't very polite to Mrs. Rogers." Howie, a serious thinker, was usually right. Suddenly, Ramona was no longer an adorable little fluffy-haired girl on television. She was plain old Ramona, a second grader whose own red tights bagged at the knee and wrinkled at the ankle. This wasn't the way things turned out on television. On television, grown-ups always smiled at everything children said. During recess, Ramona went to the girls' bathroom and rolled her tights up at the waist to stretch them up at the knee and ankle. Mrs. Rogers must have done the same thing to her pantyhose, because after recess her ankles were smooth. Ramona felt better. That afternoon, when the lower grades had been dismissed from their classrooms, Ramona found her father, along with Davy's mother, waiting outside the door of room 2 for their conferences with Mrs. Rogers. Davy's mother's appointment was first, so Mr. Quimby sat down on a chair outside the door with a folder of Ramona's schoolwork to look over. Davy stood close to the door, hoping to hear what his teacher was saying about him. Everybody in room 2 was anxious to learn what the teacher said. Mr. Quimby opened Ramona's folder. "Run along and play on the playground until I'm through," he told his daughter. "Promise you'll tell me what Mrs. Rogers says about me?" said Ramona. Mr. Quimby understood. He smiled and gave his promise. Outside, the playground was chilly and damp. The only children who lingered were those whose parents had conferences, and they were more interested in what was going on inside the building than outside. Bored, Ramona looked around for something to do, and because she could find nothing better, she followed a traffic boy across the street. On the opposite side, near the market that had been built when she was in kindergarten, she decided she had time to explore. I don't think she should have done that. That sounds awfully dangerous. In a weedy space at the side of the market building, she discovered several burdock plants that bore a prickly crop of brown burrs, each covered with sharp little hooks. Have you guys ever seen those? They're like a ball, and they have little hooks on them. Ramona saw at once that burrs had all sorts of interesting possibilities. She picked 2 and stuck them together. She added another and another. They were better than Tinker toys. She would have to tell Howie about them. When she had a string of burrs, each clinging to the next, she bent it into a circle and stuck the ends together. A crown. She could make a crown. She picked more burrs and built up the circle by making peaks all the way around, like the crown the boy wore on the margarine commercial. There was only one thing to do with a crown like that. Ramona crowned herself, ta-da, like the boy on television. Prickly though it was, Ramona enjoyed wearing the crown. She practiced looking surprised like the boy who ate the margarine and pretended she was rich and famous and about to meet her father, who would be driving a big shiny car bought with the $1 million she had earned. The traffic boys had gone off duty. Ramona remembered to look both ways before she crossed the street, and as she crossed, she pretended people were saying, "There goes that rich girl. She earned $1 million eating margarine on TV." Mr. Quimby was standing on the playground looking for Ramona. Forgetting all she had been pretending, Ramona ran to him. "What did Mrs. Rogers say about me?" she demanded. Oh my goodness, she really could have gotten hurt at that grocery store across the street. I'm so glad she didn't. She should not have done that. "That's some crown you've got there," Mr. Quimby remarked. "Daddy, what did she say?" Ramona could not contain her impatience. Mr. Quimby grinned. "She said you were impatient." "Oh, that." People were always telling Ramona not to be so impatient. "What else?" asked Ramona, as she and her father walked toward home. "You are a good reader, but you are careless about spelling." Ramona knew this, unlike Beezus, who was an excellent speller. Ramona could not believe spelling was important as long as people could understand what she meant. "What else?" She said, "You draw unusually well for a second grader, and your printing is the best in the class." "What else?" Mr. Quimby raised an eyebrow as he looked down at Ramona. "She said you were inclined to show off, and you sometimes forget your manners." Ramona was indignant at this criticism. "I do not. She's just making that up." Then she remembered what she had said about her teacher's pantyhose and felt subdued. She hoped her teacher would not repeat her remark to her father. "I remember my manners most of the time," said Ramona, wondering what her teacher had meant by showing off, being first to raise her hand when she knew the answer. "Of course you do," agreed Mr. Quimby. "After all, you are my daughter. Now tell me, how are you going to get that crown off?" Using both hands, Ramona tried to lift her crown, but only succeeded in pulling her hair. The tiny hooks clung fast. Ramona tugged. "Oh, that hurt." She looked helplessly up at her father. Mr. Quimby appeared amused. "Who do you think you are, a rose festival queen?" Ramona pretended to ignore her father's question. How silly to act like someone on television when she was a plain old second grader whose tights bagged at the knees again. She hoped her father would not guess. He might. He was good at guessing. By then, Ramona and her father were home. As Mr. Quimby unlocked the front door, he said, "Well, we'll have to see what we can do about getting you uncrowned before your mother gets home. Any ideas?" And that's the question I'm going to ask you. How are they going to get Ramona uncrowned? Do you have any ideas? See if you have extra time, write or draw an idea of how they can get those burrs off of Ramona's head. And while we're on the topic, don't you ever try that, because they're stuck to her hair pretty bad. All right, boys and girls, we'll find out what they do tomorrow when we read more of Ramona and her father. Bye-bye. Oh, not tomorrow, on Monday. Oh, you're going to have to wait the whole weekend. All right, boys and girls, we'll read it later. Bye-bye.